So hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome to the latest ride video. So I've done a few of these recently. However, pretty sure this is the case. I think this is only my second Allez ride video. So for people who have been following the channel for the last couple of months, apologies because I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. For anybody who's just found this video, maybe you're interested in an Allez. In which case you've come to the right place. There's already a couple of videos up on the channel. One is kind of a quick look first impressions review, probably only about 5-6 minutes long, but just kind of talking you through and walking you through all the different components, because as most people will know, well, some of the glossy photographs on the internet are pretty helpful. They're always taken from kind of the same 2-3 angles, and they're pretty much sent out to all of the retailers, who then inevitably end up using the same prints. So it's a little bit tricky to kind of get around the bike. So that's kind of the first thing. Apologies in advance if that's where you're heading next. I think I had a tripod, so maybe that's not too bad. I was going to apologise for the shaky hand, but yeah. Anyway, say no more. The second video on there is actually about fitting mudguards. You may or may not have heard, kind of depending on where you're coming at as far as the specialised Allez goes, but the latest models do have mudguard eyelets. The rear, really easy to fit. I'm by no means a kind of experienced home mechanic, but I had no issues at all actually fitting the rear and kind of getting that right first time. But the front does present a little bit of a challenge, so I do have a solution, simply because I actually already had a set of mudguards hanging around, but otherwise it's a case of basically doing a little bit of home engineering. So there's a couple of videos that's already up, and I've just remembered that there was also actually a first kind of ride video as well, which I think is probably my longest ride out on this bike to date. So I headed out with one of my friends. I think we did her in the region of about 40-45 miles, and that was really just a means of kind of getting out and trying as best as I could to get the bike set up. I've taken measurements off of other bikes and such like, but even by the end of that, it didn't really feel like it was kind of 100% set up for me, if I'm being brutally honest. And as you'll have seen from this footage, there's a little bit of rocking kind of left to right, and that isn't when I'm actually out of the saddle either. That's because actually I don't know, maybe in about 10 or 15 miles time, I actually stopped and lowered the saddle a little bit, and then all of a sudden the image is a hell of a lot more stable. So one of those things, we're talking a couple of mil, but that's one of the things that I do actually really like about this bike, is the amount of adjustability that you've got in the front and the rear. So, you know, kind of the stem height, being able to get the bars where you want them to be, and then also the seat post, because everything's, you know, fairly traditional and, you know, pretty typical really of not just any road bike, but kind of, you know, the core sort of mountain bikes and hybrids and such like. It's just very, very easy just to you know, do those kind of roadside adjustments, which hopefully doesn't happen, but if I need to, kind of roadside maintenance as well. So this footage that you're seeing now, this was actually recorded kind of between Christmas and New Year. It's been really mild here in the UK, so I was kind of tempted, I have to say, to actually get kind of the best bike out a little more than I did, but then that would sort of defeat the point of having a winter bike. So I was disciplined for once and just decided to take this out. So a lot of the footage that you're seeing here, this is kind of one of my favoured test routes, if you like, for the simple fact that there's kind of maybe 8 or 9k of going up. Nothing like the Alps, so yeah, don't get too excited. But what it does offer is a fairly long stretch of road that's generally pretty quiet, and you kind of get a long or a number of long stretches at kind of 4-5%. So it does enable me to just kind of sit up and just spin the legs and just kind of get a feel for the bike, really, I guess. I do notice the weight a bit, I would say, but it's by no means kind of as bad as my last experience with the Specialized Alley. I think there's probably two things with that. This is without question a higher spec, but also I think I was never kind of 100% right with that bike. I probably made too many adjustments here and there, and it was just completely out. Because in the end I was getting so fed up that there was kind of no science involved with it. It was completely by eye, making adjustments, going out riding, probably getting 10 miles down the road thinking, oh yeah, this is okay, and then the last 10 were painful. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So I do like this bike so far. As I said, I think we're around about the kind of 2 to 230 mile mark. Certainly, actually, as I'm just putting this together now, I'm just back from another kind of 30 miler. Weather's turned now, it's far colder, but wrap up, spin the legs, and it's actually far more enjoyable, I've got to say. It's kind of what I was hoping for, because as I've just touched on, the last Allez I really didn't get on with, to the point where the last winter it just sat in the garage. And pretty much any of the cycling that I did outside, I just went off-road or used the Diverge on-road, just because I was actually comfortable on that. So far, I'm pretty pleased with this. I've not really found any massive limitations with it. So I think if you are interested in this bike commuting to work, definitely ticks the box. It's comfortable. You're not going to feel kind of beaten up, depending on sort of the mileage and the terrain that you're doing, of course. But that's nothing really that any bike's going to help you with. So I think as a commuter, the fact that you can get the mudguards on there is pretty good. If you are looking for a road bike to maybe do a couple of sportives a year, maybe something pretty hilly and a little bit shorter, perhaps the 50-60 mile mark, don't see any issues with it there. Primarily because I think the gearing that comes on this bike is pretty good. I think in the past we've had bikes that have been kind of built for sort of endurance and sportive riding, even maybe just a few hours at the weekend. Maybe you're only somebody who gets out kind of once a week, but then they go and put kind of ridiculous gears on them. So having that compact chain set up front and having an 1132 cassette at the rear, you're pretty much sorted as far as I'm concerned. I think you're going to have to kind of be in a position where you've probably blown up to not be able to just put it into the easiest gear and just be able to, lightly turn the pedals. Equally, there's a couple of sections actually on this loop, and this is one of the things that I like about it, where you don't really touch the gears, but you can just, pop yourself out the saddle and give it a bit of a nudge, especially kind of on these rolling sections, and the bike does respond pretty well. And so much so, actually, in a couple of minutes' time, there's going to be kind of it's a stretch of road that I really like riding, for the simple fact that you get these sort of very short, punchy uphills. Equally, you get the same down, but then there's kind of twisty turns or twisty turning roads as well, kind of in between. And there's a decent amount of feel from the bike, I've got to say. It really does respond kind of as well as any alloy frame that I've ridden. So I'm pretty pleased with it from that point of view. But going back to what I was saying, commuting, sportive riders, you won't have any issues with this. Equally, if you're somebody who's maybe got a higher spec road bike and you're looking for something for the winter, I don't feel kind of completely out of my comfort zone going from something that's full carbon, higher end group set, to then hopping on this. And I keep coming back to this, but I especially like the fact that you can actually put mudguards on it, and at least in theory, be able to use the eyelets as well. So, pretty good. A couple of things that I don't like. So, in the interest of being kind of open and honest, there are a couple of things that I have changed. So first of all, the saddle. Now, this isn't because there's anything actually wrong with the saddle that comes on the bike, but saddles are a very personal thing, and generally I use the same two different models by Specialized. Unfortunately, because I let my old Allez go, then I did actually have a saddle hanging around that I knew I'd get on with, so I've popped that on there. But I've kind of just started this off by saying there's a couple of things that I don't like, and then said, oh no, there isn't actually an issue with the saddle. So let me just clear that one up. I think the saddle the bike comes with is perfectly adequate, provided you find it comfortable. So then moving on to one of the things that I do not like about this bike, and it's pretty true of a number of kind of specialized bikes, probably from kind of the, I don't know, maybe the £500 mark going up to kind of £1,000, and that is the tyres. So they are the Specialized Espoir Sport tyres. I've had experience of these a couple of times, but specifically on this bike, there are 25mm that are actually fitted, and I just think they're horrible. They're just too stiff. They don't do a particularly good job of kind of, I guess, taking the road buzz kind of out of the bike. Maybe, because I haven't actually had an experience where I've actually got a puncher with them, so maybe that's kind of their saving grace. So perhaps commuting, maybe they're a decent enough tyre for that. But having had experience of kind of higher end tyres, I was kind of determined to try them. I rode them 45 miles and they were just awful. So I've swapped them out. So that's maybe something to consider. Having said that, if you're one of those people who just perhaps put up with them, run them into the ground, I think they will last. That's one thing that I would say about them. And that's kind of one of my concerns as to why actually I just, more or less when they're in brand new condition, take them off, and I'll just keep them now as kind of emergency tyres, I think. So other than that, what else is there to actually say about the bike that hasn't been said already? Well, I can't really think of anything. To be honest, I'm all out. So I think as kind of a recap really, I think frame very good for the price point. I think the components very good for the price point. Perhaps a little bit disappointed that it's not a full 105 group set. So maybe Specialized could have done a better job at kind of dropping the Praxis chain set and putting a 105 on there. But having said that, it does perform. So just one of those things, but I think it probably would go some way to maybe convincing a few more people that actually this is a pretty good bike in terms of value for money. Wheel wise, no concerns over them. One point I guess to kind of throw out there is if you look at the specs, it says that they're DT Swiss. Now actually they're not, they're DT Swiss rims. The hubs appear just to be unbranded. I am at some point, probably the first time when I actually clean the bike, I am going to actually remove the cassette and have a look at the free hub, just so I can give you guys some insight as to actually what the internals are like. But yeah, no issues with them. They seem to engage pretty well, whatever that free hub is. They've stayed pretty true, kind of a couple of 100 miles in. And the UK roads aren't exactly the smoothest, so no real complaints from that point of view. So I'll put it out there now to you guys. If there's any specific questions that you want me to try and answer, then please do pop me a comment in the section below. Otherwise, please like and subscribe if you would like to see more. Thanks for watching.